I want to welcome Jeanne Foot to Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you are with the Recovery Concierge. Can you give a little bit of a background of your story with us?
Absolutely. The Recovery Concierge was really innovated out of what wasn't there for me and my children at subsequent transitions in our journey to healing through mental health addiction and trauma. We suffer from three generations of it. And so I had a trauma issue for many, many years. And when I noticed was I also had a substance abuse issue. And in my early 30s, which was in the early 90s, I went into treatment and I disclosed fully my history of sexual abuse. And all they focused on was the trauma, was the substance abuse. You know, that was before trauma was trendy. It's very trendy right now. And so I got clean. And I remember being at a pivotal point in my recovery. I was 7 years in, 6.5, 7 years in, and I felt like I wanted to off myself. Like, seriously, I had three children, a husband, a career, a white picket fence. I had all the things, but I hated the essence of who I was at every fabric of my being. And nobody really was recommending anything. I was not medicated. I wasn't not seeing anything. I was in 12 step. And it kept me clean, but I wasn't well. And I recognized at that moment there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. And that's what sent me on a quest to into anything and everything. And I've been in that same quest for the last 30 plus years. So here we are.
I like how you put I was clean but not well, because I think some people associate being clean or sober as then that's what helps you to be well. But I like how you phrase that's not necessarily an equal thing.
Well, what I learned is, first of all, traumatized people or people who suffer with addiction are definitely, they have tremendous shame. We all do as humans, but I think the spectrum on that, and we even more so as, people who suffer. And so I was clean and not well meant there's, with my clients, I look for a higher level of functioning because if the metric is always abstinence, and there's not and not other things are working in their life, is that really recovery? It's a start, good, better, best. I'm always about good, better, best, but really, if we can't really engage with somewhere someone's not really living fully, then really what is recovery? So to me, recovery is about emotional sobriety. It's about thriving in all sorts of ways. It's about redesigning your life that you'd never want to go back to where you came from. You have to have something better. Otherwise, your old life will always be an allure trying to pull you back. So I look for the metrics we look for in our clients. And so sometimes abstinence is actually necessary. So it's not a debate whether abstinence is a thing or not. It's just that sometimes a level of function is just as important as well.
Which is always important because when we talk about how something becomes disruptive or unmanageable, we look at how someone's not able to function or struggling to function. So it
Hmm.
is even how we begin some of the talk about how it's impacting your life. And then we look at like it causes impairment. And then when we look at, recovering from it, part of it is bringing that back to the very same thing that we were discussing as to how it was impacting someone. So it's amazing how we sometimes don't go back to that when it was the very first thing that we often brought up as to why this is a problem or concern or is an issue because the impact it is having on functioning.
Well, I agree with you. And I think age has afforded me some wisdom. So what happens is I believe you can dial anything down. So you can stop someone from maybe using in the right circumstances or under the right urgency or whatever it may be, fear or consequences. And not for everybody, but for most people. But and this has been my problem in the sense that over the years, could be clean for 6 years, 7 years, 2.5 years, 17 months, you name it. And I would end up using, not having a life debilitating use. But what would happen for me is the shame was horrendous. And I think you can dial things down, but unless you get to the emotional root drivers of something, it's at best it's gonna go up and down and up and down. You're not gonna have sustainable recovery. And that was a challenge for me because of my history. And really, they saw that as separate rather than integrated. I think, Dr. Gabor Mate was the one who put, trauma on the map in terms of recovery healing. Until then, which I came 30 years too early, nobody really knew what it was about, right? So it was a challenge for me. Absolutely.
And one of the things that I was looking up on your website was part of your motto is we are all in recovery from life, which I'm really interested to hear about you talk about that because we often use phrases or sayings like recovery from substance use or recovery from mental health and all these things that someone could be going through. But you look at it as like we are all in recovery from life. So can you talk about that motto, how you've
Absolutely.
come to look at that and where you use that in the work that you do?
Absolutely. I think like we all in recovery from something, whatever that may be for us. We all have stuff. I think where the missing link is that we have not been really taught to embrace our humanity, that we're complex, messy, emotional creatures. That's what makes us different than animals, right? And so, what's universal for me, like it's normal to not feel enough. There's spectrum on all of this. Of course, like somebody who has a traumatic history or who has a substance abuse history who's filled with shame, they're going to feel different than someone who, may look at their friend to the right and think that they're not as lucky as that person. But it's normal to feel we're not enough. Are we going to be liked? Are we going to be loved? And so this is something we suffer with in silence. We don't talk about this because we're taught vulnerability is not our thing, right? We're taught to sort of, armor up, get on with it, and do what you have to do. So I think that the mere fact that we can't really see that you are me and I am you, and until we start to acknowledge that and really embrace that to be human is to be messy is to make mistakes, and we embrace all of our parts, our shadow, our parts, and it is only as we start to integrate these wounded parts that we really become more whole. And I think the challenge is that we're not taught this. We figure this out. Um, for me in particular, if you knew me like 30 years ago, you would never believe I'm sitting here because I couldn't look in a mirror. I hated myself that much, Andrew. Like I could not look in a mirror. My history told me that I was an absolute failure, that nobody could love me, that what do you have to offer? So it's been a hell of a journey getting here. Like it's not being easy or for the faint-hearted. None of this is. So I think that when we start to embrace what's universal for all of us, I think that makes us recognize that we are like each other. We're more like each other than different.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about just the understanding the humanness in who we are.
Hmm.
Because I think some people, the way it is portrayed or talked about is like all of a sudden something happens and that creates this change into why but from the beginning, like as humans, we are the way we're built, the way we are, how things go, that we all have some of these challenges, struggles, and then you compound it with things, with trauma, substance use, and all this. But just from the beginning, understanding what it means to be human and understanding all that isn't something we really talk about or have conversations about. Usually not until way later, like way after, after
Hmm.
years of experience or getting into something. But these aren't conversations we have when we're growing up, when we're younger, when we're in some of those really important years. We're missing just conversations around what it means to be human.
Well, absolutely. And there's a new generation, and my children are part of that. This conscious parenting. Um, I think I was the change agent in my generation, because my parents were still like, as long as it looked good, it was all good. And, they were good people, but they really didn't know what they didn't know. Right. And they thought they were doing their best. And that was, we don't air our dirty laundry. We keep things private. And I think when we really suffer, whether it was them experiencing something with my late brother took the whole family emotional hostage. He literally did. And so all of that was kept underground all the time. And, there were police at our house all the time. There were ambulances all the time. There was always crisis. That was my normal as a child, apart from what would later happen to me. But the point I'm trying to say is we suffer in isolation. And that really makes the pain and the heartache and the journey so much more difficult to come through, whether it's for the family members or whether it's for the person of concern. It doesn't really matter. It's just a very painful journey.
Yeah, and there was I think one of the things that was talked about was like the loneliness
Mm-hmm.
epidemic, the impact of loneliness, which is always fascinating that, we talk about like the difference between like being alone and feeling lonely. You can be by yourself and you can have some time for you, connect with yourself, and it doesn't mean you're feeling lonely, even though you are by yourself. But also you could be in a room full of people, so you're not alone, but you could feel extremely lonely, even when there's a lot of people around you.
I think
So
that's even worse, right?
yeah,
When
yeah, yeah, that's where it can be really hard to look at that we as humans, as social beings, like we need connection. That is a part of how we are. And we know that, and we look at things of what helps us to connect, but then we look at things that are interfering with our connection. So I'm curious in the work that you do, and when you talk about recovery from life, you talk about, the being human. Do you bring a lot of that basic stuff into the conversation to sort of just bring it back to who we are and how we're built and what we're made to connect with one another? Do you bring that back into some of the conversations and the work that you do with people?
Absolutely. First of all, I deal work with a lot of families. Not always the client is the person who hires me or works with me. So the family sometimes is the client, and they're the ones who actually need this as much as my clients do because they're under the illusion that the focus is on the person of concern. Like, let's just get them under control. Let's get them fixed, and everything will be okay, and not recognizing that that person cannot go into that same dynamic or same um, relationship without changes happening. And so that's very much a part of the work I do. But the other part of sorry, what was the question you were asking? And I just slipped my mind. I'm sorry. It was you
Just
talking about
how like how do you bring this up when you are working with people, bringing it back to
the compassion process because they hate themselves. I know that I did, and not everybody had that level of self-loathing. But when you don't aspire to land up in a treatment facility or to admit that you're an alcoholic or you're an addict. And I have tremendous problem with the language and the stigma that's associated. And that's a number one barrier for people getting well is stigma. So unless we recognize that they're inherently worthy, they're just misaligned. They're stuck in dis-ease within their mind, body, and spirit. And so that doesn't mean they should be treated poorly just because, they're already beating themselves up. So I feel like you can catch more bees with honey than you can with vinegar. So it's the same analogy that we want to treat people respectfully, kindly. We want to give them some hope and we want them to know that they are inherently worthy no matter where they've landed, because it matters what they do from this moment forward. That's what matters, not what they've done.
yeah, I do a lot of talks on like stigmatizing language, how we talk about the issues. It makes all the difference in the world and people feeling like they can seek services, seek care, everything. And I'm curious because when I looked at all the services you offer a lot of different things. So I do want to kind of go down into like what is it that when someone comes to you and they're seeking services, all the things that are there. I'm really curious about the title, the Recovery Concierge. And the reason why I want to kind of know where that came from is because in over time, as I've been doing this for like over 20 years with counseling, I've felt that the profession sometimes has relied on people needing to be in such a bad place that, well, when they need help, we'll be here. Like we'll be there when they need it or when it's bad enough.
The
that
bottom concept, right?
yeah, yeah, that we don't always I'm always a big fan of that our profession could do a lot better with really customer service and how we talk about the people that we serve, the people that we're helping, but also when people call our number, like when they call and they seek care or they visit a website, that they should get the same experience that we expect when we are trying to go somewhere or do something. That there shouldn't be this whole like expert power dynamic that's going on, that we need to be experts at, providing service because we are. That's what we're doing. We're providing
Mhm.
a service. So then when I saw your name, the Recovery Concierge, I was almost thinking like, wow, it just sounds so much like a welcoming, inviting, like this is something that's for me versus like, well, thinking like I have to go to some expert or think that I'm less than something. Like I'm the most like I feel like that there's a really strong connection there. So I could be way off. I just want to know like where did the
No, you're not way
concierge
off.
concept come from?
The concierge concept came from that therapeutic navigation needs to be treated with dignity and respect and kindness because people are in their most vulnerable state when they come to you. Um, they also concierge services really, to me, this is basically on my first business. I have relationships that go back 30, 40 years. Okay. So I'm a relationship based person. So that's what this business is built on, the fact that we are relationship based. And sometimes it pains me because some people get well, come through and get well, and I never hear from them again because I can be a reminder of a painful time in their life. Even though, getting well is kind of the entry price into the best life, there's more here. We don't finish here. We just go on to becoming from fragile to anti-fragile to living your best epic life ever. What does that mean, right? Because we can keep going, right into peak performance and, holistic well-being and all the things. So it comes from being really trying to appropriately match a client to the right needs and services because we can always escalate intervention. But if we start high and we start to say, well, this person needs treatment or this person needs 12 step or this person needs whatever, right? And we think we're their experts. And I do believe people are experts in their own life to a degree. However, we can't, once we go too high with escalating in what we think they need, we can't dial it back. So it's easier to start lower and then go up, but it's really based, everything we do is based on relationship based care. That's what it's important to us. It's really important to me. I want people
Yeah,
to feel valued,
yeah, I love hearing.
appreciated.
I really love hearing that because I think for far too long, like I said, we've relied on someone needing us so bad, or when things have gotten to such a tough spot or a bad spot that, well, people will they'll come to us or they'll know we're here. Versus like it's important to build like trust with places and people. Because also I realize what's really important is people don't always have the best experiences when they've gone to some other places. And then that impacts how they even see a future provider, a future counselor, a future treatment program, that
100%.
our trust isn't just, well, I'm a counselor, trust me. Like, no, it just doesn't work that way.
Well, that's why there's a lot of people Google, like because we have so much information at our fingertips today, people think, okay, I need a treatment center, boo, boo, boo. No, that they may not need a treatment center. They may need some level of coaching or accountability or understanding or compassion to see if we can hold them accountable for a small period of time if it's not life threatening. I'm not talking about life threatening cases where someone is on the brink here. I'm talking about we need, and it is not for a family member to assess either. So a lot of times when people Google, they get sales engines, as you know, for treatment centers. They don't have or they may have someone with lived experience. Not that that's a terrible thing, but they may not have someone who has the expertise to really understand what is the next best step for this individual and really assess them and be able to navigate them therapeutically to an appropriate match. Because you know as well as I do that this is a very nuanced process. We know how to fix broken hearts, broken bones, but we don't know how to fix, well, broken hearts. I meant cardio before I was thinking, but we don't really know how to do, really fix. There's not a process, a clear process for mental health because there's so many variables in it, or addiction for that sake. And I think when we start to recognize that it is more of a nuanced process, we can find the best match because we're trying to engage someone. It's not about just getting someone into treatment. We want to get a return on our investment there, that that person comes out well and that, that they can restart their life in the best possible way ever. That is the second act for that matter.
How do you how do you go about doing that? Because I think that's a missed area where people look at like counseling, they look at other things and they're sort of like, well, if you have this issue, this matches, like this works. But it can easily become like a cookie cutter thing or it can easily become a one size fits all. How do you approach working towards matching people to what service or what best you think that they need versus thinking everything just applies to everyone?
So that is something that I'm actually going to start training other professionals on how to navigate. I'd like to see a world full of certified recovery concierges where there's a very clear process for professionals to understand what to do if and when someone comes to them. And it could be whether they're in education, it could be in corrections, it could be in justice, it could be in counseling and mental health, whatever. But to answer your question, because I think there's no clear process. You can have a psychotherapist who's great at psychotherapy, but doesn't understand addiction. Or you could have a medical doctor who's in a hospital and is going to let someone who needs to be contained for another 24 hours walk out that door. So, there are nuance in how we approach this. Um, First of all, we do a thorough history. I'm really assessing for what is already. First of all, we assess for safety, number one, without saying, is this person a risk to themselves? Is this person a risk to others? What do we need to do to contain them, if at all? What is their level of readiness? Who's wanting this more than it? Is it a relationship issue? Is it the family that wants this? Is this a youth problem? Is this just a passage for a teenager, or is this something more concerning? Are there consequences with the law? And then from there, for me, it's very intuitive. I'll be honest with you. It's very hard for me to abstract exactly how I do it, but there are parameters that we're looking for and metrics that we're looking for when someone first lands in my space. And I think another part of it is what has been done before and has it worked or not worked? Because we don't want to keep repeating the same thing either. So that's an important metric. And then what would be the best option? And I think good, better, best. And sometimes we're matching it to budget as well. Not everybody has insurance. Not everybody has, the funds to fund treatment, right? And there's great sacrifices. So we want to make sure. And then once we decided the type of treatment, there's a whole nother drill down within the treatment sector. You know, what's the milieu inside? Who's inside? Is this female? Is it co-ed? Is it, what ages, what demographic? Like, is this person going to resonate? Because you can't put someone who's in business with a bunch of young adults. That's not going to work, right? Or vice versa, right? They're not going to relate to each other. So there's a lot of different variables we're looking for.
And that idea to that seems so unique to really have this training program or this way of certifying people to really be this concierge because I think that would just be a real significant difference maker in people feeling like they aren't just kind of being moved through an assembly line or they're just kind of being pushed through like what everyone else is. That like no, when it comes to you, like there's going to be this specific, match up to what suits you best or what matches your needs. I think that would be a fascinating thing to see.
Well, thank you. It's a relentless vision of mine that won't quit. It would be easier to walk away. I can tell you that at my stage of life. But I think we have to raise our standards collectively. And this is not about me. I can help families And I have, and I feel like I could help more families if I could share what has worked well for us, right? And I've been very privileged to be part of a hospital program where we've done clinical outcomes and research where we took our own expertise because I have, unfortunately, not only my own lived experience, I have teenagers and who are no longer, they're young adults now with their own families, but who have gone through therapeutic navigation from Canada into the US because services are non existent in our country still, which is one of the reasons why I do what I do. Um, and that has been part of our process too. So I've had the privilege of learning from some of the very best people and mentors in my life that didn't exist. And some of them are really aging out now. They're elders who have aged out or recently passed. And yeah, I believe that sometimes we get the life we need because we have to pay it forward to teach it and help others.
And talk about such a need because when you think about the family seeking services or help is a whole another thing versus even just one person
Hmm.
seeking services or seeking care. So to me, I think that would help change really some of the stigma that family members experience when it comes to seeking out services and how to do that. Because right now, I think it is very, we know there's less services for the family members, right? We know there's a lot less available. We also know it can be a little challenging because you have multiple people in a family system. So being able to create some way to make that less challenging for a family seeking services, which it can be a lot difficult. Sometimes it's one person trying to figure that out, or it's one person trying to encourage the whole family to do it. But to be able to create a system where families as a group as a whole would be able to feel better about seeking care is really a missing thing in a lot of areas in this
I think you're
profession.
right. I think families are very much overlooked and they have an important role because number one, they're a motivator. And number one, they can be a motivator to getting well for family members. They also are guardians of really important information because if we're asking the person of concern to disclose and self select what they want to share with treatment providers, that could be very different than what the real reality is. So, there's a lot of value in incorporating family members into this. And they're not told or recognize that they're such an important asset in this process because after all, when that person is well, they're going to want to re-engage with the family. And if the family's still back there and our client's now well and in the forward thinking process, it doesn't work anymore. We need to renegotiate the terms of the relationship into healthier ways and boundaries.
How do you work with individuals about the importance of having a family involved? When I worked with kids, it was automatic because when there's a kid involved, there's some family member involved because they're a kid, right? And then sometimes when I'm working with, a married couple or a relationship and there's two people involved, like they're there. What I've found is sometimes talking with adults about having other family involved is sometimes a challenge
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes they don't. And I think part of it, a lot of reasons why, but sometimes it's like I caused enough damage, or I already put enough burden on them, or maybe the we've done this before and this they told me this was their last time. So I think some of it there's just some completely understanding reluctance to wanting it. But I think it's a tough age because like now the person's an adult, they can make that choice whether or not to have someone involved. Difference like when you're with kids or teenagers and then the family member is almost automatically involved. So how do we have conversations with adults who have the right to choose who they want involved in their treatment, who they don't want, why it's important that they have family member involved in their care, their treatment, versus sometimes we say like, oh, they're they're my support network, or they I can rely on them if I need them. That doesn't mean they're involved in the services or the care. They can do that
Hmm.
outside of that. So how do we bridge that gap to having more family members be a part of the actual services and treatment and care that someone is receiving? So I think that's an area we're still missing, especially when you work with like just adults and try and get
I
them to
agree
have
with
other
you.
families involved.
Well, first of all, we're relational beings, so it makes sense to include the people closest to us. So usually there's a lot of emotional damage and toxic shame associated with everything around it. How it organically happened for me, and there's many reasons why we do it, but I think when someone comes to me, and it's usually typically it is when a family comes to me, it's usually typically there's an intervention of some sort that needs to happen. Okay, if the family comes to me to get their loved one into treatment or something, then I'm typically working with both, or a team is. So what I say to them, and is what I truly believe, is each side wants something different. So there's a mediation process that really needs to happen here. So like the client is wanting, get the family off my back. They don't understand me. I'm misunderstood. I'm hurting. They don't really know me at all. I need something different if I'm going to engage with them. And the family wants, fix my loved one. I need this to work better but they don't understand that they need to do their own work too. So everybody needs to do their own work and come together collectively as well. So, like, if you can sort of bridge that gap, how this is going to be a win-win for everybody, and that they are instrumental in successful outcomes because we want the relationship to be easier, to be different, to be more rewarding, more kind, more loving, more respectful, then you can get some buy-in. So it's really more of a mediative process. That's how typically it's been done over the years.
Yeah, I like that. That's a very great way of approaching it and talking about it, bringing it up and having those conversations. 'Cause I think we're missing that in the discussion. I think sometimes we ask the question like, who do you want involved, or who's your support, and it gets answered, and then we kind of treat it more of like a checkbox versus like we should be having this more of a relationship conversation, not just uh, we asked the question and got the answer. So I really like that approach. I appreciate that.
And I want to just add, thank you, that you say that we check the box. Like the more we allow addiction to thrive in silos, the greater the addiction will be, number one. But I think the point I was trying to make there's something that when treatment providers really welcome our inclusion in the case management because they see there's absolute value, I usually know way more than anybody until they're inside about what's coming inside. So how we transfer information to help expedite the process of recovery can really jumpstart that process, right, as well, because we wanted this to be a successful outcome for everybody. So I think we need to start recognizing that there's an asset process in doing it the way that we do it when we're working collectively as a health team, as opposed to someone just doing this on their own. And it's their problem. And there's a lot of finger pointing that goes with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate that. When it comes to the the wide range of services that you have, how do you break down for people, even just to begin having that conversation of everything? Because when you look at, the services you provide, what you offer, and there's so many things from specific types of therapies, techniques, to also courses, workshops, like how do you even begin to like let people know about like the full menu, I guess? Because in my mind, I'm seeing all this and it's like a menu of options for all this stuff that's there. How do you begin to talk to people about what it is that when they come to seek your care, knowing there's all this services involved, like where that begins and how that gets to match with them and stuff like that? Because you do have a lot of great stuff that you offer.
Thank you. Um, I think first of all, I don't think we're conventional in anything that we do. And part of that has been because that hasn't been worked for me, hasn't been successful for me. So it could be timing, it could be many different things. Things have more evolved and we know more. When we know better, we do better, right? And I also believe that evidence-based practices do take time to catch up. So the newer emerging practices like somatic, holistic health, all of that, and they can mean different things for different people. So the question is how. It really depends on the readiness of the client. Like I'm working with a 30-year-old female right now who interviewed a few different addiction professionals to decide who she was going to work with. I ended up being the person. I didn't know if I would because she went dark on me. And then she came back. Anyway, bottom line is she has thrived in only 2, 3 months of working weekly with me. Why? Because first of all, she knows who she is. She's not even denying that she has a problem with substance abuse. She has already acknowledged that I am that person who I can't trust when I'm under the influence of drugs. It's really that simple. So, for her, she's gobbling everything up that I'm talking about, right? Where I could have a same client who has the same history as her and is still in somewhat denial about how bad this really is. And maybe the husband or the boyfriend or whoever is trying to put some pressure on them to come and see someone and is just sort of dialing things down, which comes back with a vengeance. So they're kind of hydroplaning through the process as opposed to really jumping in and recognizing that they're the beneficiary of this outcome. Right? If you do well in this, you're going to do great in your life. It's really that simple, right? I'm not forcing you to do anything, or you can just kind of hydroplane through your life and you can superficial through it all, and that will be it too. So it's up to you, right? So I think, you know, I always look at the approach as good, better, best. I don't believe that there's any one way. And this is a person who had, when I talk about this young woman, she was someone who had been in therapy since she was a young kid. She's 30 now for eating disorders and substance abuse. She's been in one of the Toronto's best kind of counseling firms, and she's coming to me, and now she's doing amazing. So why? I think know thyself to be true is one of them, right? We have to really know thyself. They're the beneficiary of their efforts. And I think that when we treat people with love and compassion and kindness, I think we can get further with them than stigmatizing them and
Completely
put it
agree.
into a box, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Very well put. Okay,
Thank you.
before we get to a last takeaway from you, you are also working on your podcast,
Hmm.
right? Um, so can you tell us a little bit more about your podcast, for the listeners?
Absolutely. Thank you. So, Naturally High is really innovated out of wanting to feel good, but in healthier ways, right? Obviously, I've always liked to get high. It's just what is the better way? And we do have access within our own endocrine system, hormonal system, our own pharmacy within to really feel good. And in that is a lot of different variables on how we manage to do that from our relationships, from our purpose, our understanding, our emotional regulation, right to diet, to sleep, some foundational things that sound like really like that's going to make a difference. But it's like a cocktail of many different things and different healing processes that really allow us. And I think when we're in our truest authenticity, sovereignty, our truest integration or integrity with ourself, I think we just naturally thrive. And so that's really what Naturally High is about. It's about guests, a lot of professionals. It's also about me musing about the things that I just obsessively think about all the time, trying to figure it out, and just some life experience as well.
That's great. I think people that's a big part of a lot of what we talk about, and I think that podcast to be really dedicated because I think that comes up in different things, different areas, but to have a podcast that really primarily focuses on talking about that and having people share it, information and knowledge on it and ways to do it is something that's really going to be what listeners want to hear. Because part of it, I just did a presentation with a good friend of mine at a conference on humor and laughter
Hmm.
in treatment and recovery, and that, you know, people want to feel good. They want
Of
to
course.
laugh and I think someone even said during our talk was like, well, what is recovery without fun and excitement and enjoyment? And I think sometimes people realize that, but then there's also just a struggle that it just doesn't come naturally after some things. Like some people are wondering why isn't it there? How come I'm not feeling this way? And I think through your podcast, learning and hearing all those things are going to help people to believe that that can be achieved, that can be done. So I think there's a lot of times where people feel like they don't feel that way and they're stuck wondering why or how come I don't get enjoyment out of this or how come this doesn't feel good or the only way I can do that is through other means, which I'm trying not to do anymore. So very, very much looking forward to hearing about those future episodes.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's still a stigma around recovery still being somewhat punitive, something wrong, rather than a pro-life choice, really. Like, you know, it's the best vitality when you're in your true zone of genius in your health, in your life, in your relationships, in your career. You're thriving, like you're beyond thriving, like you're resilient, you're anti-fragile, like you know that life is going to throw you your share of whatever because that's life, it's inevitable, but you're ready for it. And for me right now, as I feel like I call myself an elder, but I'm a hipster elder. I'm still very vital and young for my age, even though I am aging. And there's no way I want to be here if I was doing a two-step shuffle. Like, not a chance that I'd want to be on this earth. So, it's like I'm on the floor playing with my grandsons, like I'm doing it all. And I think we have that opportunity, each and every one of us, to do it all. And not to have it all, but to do whatever it is that we really, truly want and that lights us up. And I believe that there's a life beyond what we can really imagine if we give ourselves a chance to get through the discomfort of feeling temporarily bad to have sustainable good. And so that's why I do it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So, final takeaways. What is it that you would want listeners to know or to think about as we wrap this up? And we're going to give them all the links to your website where they can listen to the podcast and everything. So, what would be, final takeaways that you'd want to have for the audience members?
I want people to recognize that no matter where they are in their life, that there's something amazing waiting for them. And I also want to recognize that we don't care how someone gets well as long as they do. So we should be more open minded to all pathways to recovery. And I think that there's also levels of recovery in a sense that we don't know what we don't know until we know that we're ready for more as well. And so recovery to me is really about living your best kick-ass life that you could ever, ever, ever imagine, including repairing relationships. I'm in a 44-year-old marriage and we are thriving and we haven't always been. So I'll leave that with you to say that anything is really possible. So why wouldn't you go for it?
That's great. I love that takeaway. That is so valuable and important for people to hear. And
Thank you.
I think we should just keep saying stuff like that and never get tired of letting people know that. So I really appreciate the time you spent in talking to us. The Recovery Concierge seems quite incredible. Looking forward to hearing more episodes of the podcast and everything. But I just want to thank you for joining us and taking the time to tell us about all the work that you do. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Andrew. And the same to you. Thank you again.